The air in the conference room smelled like dry erase markers and desperate ambition. It was 9 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of gray Minneapolis morning where the sky looks like a bruised sheet of aluminum and the coffee in the break room tastes like battery acid filtered through a gym sock. I was sitting in my usual spot, the back corner, away from the sunlight, away from the glossy mahogany table where the visionaries sat. I'm Marla. I'm 45. I have a face that people forget 5 seconds after they look at it, and a job title, Senior Patents and Compliance Specialist, that sounds boring enough to induce comas at cocktail parties. But I am the reason this company hasn't been sued into a smoking crater in the ground. We were in the Q3 strategic planning session. At the head of the table sat Craig. Craig was our new director of innovation, a man who looked like he was manufactured in a lab funded by LinkedIn and hair gel. He was 32, wore suits that were too tight in the calves, and used words like synergy, paradigm, and ideation as if they actually meant something. He had been with the company for 3 months. I had been here for 12 years. He was making 3 times my salary to point a PowerPoint presentation that I had essentially written for him. We are looking at a quantum leap in revenue, Craig announced, slapping the whiteboard with the back of his hand. He had the energy of a golden retriever that had just ingested a bag of espresso beans. With the rollout of the Gemini X module, our partnership with Titan Corp is going to scale vertically. We're talking about a $400 million valuation shift, people. This is the big leagues, and the IP is fully locked down. That's when my left eye twitched, just a little. A microspasm of professional annoyance. I cleared my throat. It was a dry, quiet sound, but in the acoustic vacuum of the boardroom, it sounded like a gunshot. Craig, I said, keeping my voice level, just a point of clarification on the IP lockdown. Craig stopped mid-gesture. He looked at me like I was a printer that had just jammed. Marla, we're in a flow state here. Can we park the details in the lot? It's not a detail, I said, adjusting my glasses. We listed the Gemini X neural architecture as wholly owned proprietary assets. But the underlying optimization algorithm, Patent 4312, has a pending flag in the internal audit system. It's not fully assigned to the legacy ledger yet. The room went quiet. The CEO, a man named Robert who had the backbone of a chocolate eclair left on a dashboard in July, looked up from his phone. Marla, Craig sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. You've been over this? Legal said we're good. Titan Corp is ready to sign. Stop trying to find problems where there are only solutions. You're killing the vibe. I'm not trying to kill the vibe, Craig. I'm trying to keep us from committing contract fraud. Patent 4312 is the structural load-bearing wall of that entire deal. If the assignment chain isn't clean, Titan Corp can freeze the contract. Craig laughed. It was a bark of a laugh, sharp and dismissive. He looked around the table, inviting the others to join in. A few of the junior VPs chuckled nervously, eager to align themselves with the new alpha dog. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Craig said, turning his back to me. Old school thinking, obstructionist. We are a rocket ship, Marla. You're trying to check the tire pressure while we're breaking the atmosphere. I felt the heat rise up my neck, not shame. Anger, the cold, hard anger of a person who knows exactly how the machine works being lectured by a child who just likes pushing the buttons. By the way, if you're enjoying watching a corporate train wreck in slow motion, do me a small favor and hit subscribe. It helps the algorithm find more people who hate their bosses as much as I do. I'm telling this story here because HR certainly isn't going to listen to it, and I need witnesses. Thanks. The meeting dragged on for another hour. I didn't speak again, I just took notes. Detailed, timestamped notes. I wrote down every promise Craig made, every risk he waved away, every regulation he called optional guidance. At the end of the meeting, as people were shuffling their papers and checking their smartwatches, Craig clapped his hands. One last thing, housekeeping. He turned his gaze directly to me. There was a glint in his eye, a malicious little sparkle. He wasn't just annoyed by my interruption earlier. He was offended by my existence. I was a relic of the old regime, a speed bump on his highway to the C-suite. We've been reviewing the discretionary budget for the end-of-year bonuses, Craig said, his voice loud enough to carry into the hallway. And we've decided to pivot our compensation strategy to reward growth mindsets. Unfortunately, Marla, based on your performance today and the general attitude, resistance you've displayed this quarter, I'm canceling your annual raise. And the bonus, that's off the table too. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silence. This wasn't awkward, it was horrified. Publicly stripping a senior employee of their bonus in front of the entire executive team, it was a power move so aggressive it bordered on sociopathic. We need team players, Craig continued, smiling a smile that didn't reach his dead, shark-like eyes. Not anchors. Maybe this will motivate you to get on board with the vision. Robert, the CEO, didn't say a word. He just looked down at his notepad, tracing a circle over and over again with his pen. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, resting on my notebook, went numb. 12 years. I had missed my niece's baptism for this company. I had worked through the flu, through my divorce, through the death of my mother, making sure their patents were filed. Their compliance audits were clean, their asses were covered. And this man, this tailored suit filled with sawdust and arrogance, was stripping it all away because I dared to correct him on a filing error. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. That's what they expected. They expected the emotional woman reaction. They expected me to break. Instead, I stood up. I capped my pen with a decisive click. I gathered my notebook and my tablet. Understood, I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. Craig blinked. He seemed disappointed he didn't get a tearful scene. Good, glad we're clear. Crystal, I said. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking a rhythmic beat on the gray industrial carpet. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had put the office Karen in her place. They laughed as the door closed. I could hear them. What they didn't know, what Craig in his infinite arrogance hadn't bothered to check, and what Robert was too checked out to remember, was the specific history of Patent 4312. Craig was right about one thing. It was the backbone of the $400 million deal. But he was wrong about who owned it. He thought it was a company asset. I knew for a fact it wasn't, because I wrote it. And I knew exactly where the bodies were buried because I was the one holding the shovel. My cubicle was in the compliance annex, which is corporate speak for the dark corner near the server room where we put the people who actually do work. It hummed with the white noise of cooling fans and the faint, ozone smell of overheating electronics. I liked it here. It was far away from the glass-walled offices where people like Craig touched base and circled back. Here, reality existed. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, one I paid for myself because the company-issued ones were designed to slowly dismantle the human spine, and placed my hands on the desk. My breathing was shallow. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But my mind was cooling down, freezing over into a block of absolute clarity. Attitude, he had said, resistance. I opened my drawer. It was organized with a precision that would make a surgeon weep. Post-it notes color-coded by urgency. A spreadsheet of filing deadlines that I maintained manually because the automated system was prone to glitching. And there, in the back, tucked inside a plain manila folder labeled Miscellaneous Legacy, was the file. I didn't open it immediately. I just rested my finger on the tab. Let me explain something about patent law. It is boring. It is incredibly soul-crushing boring. It is a world of minutiae, of semicolons that change the fate of millions of dollars, of filing dates stamped to the millisecond. It is a world where close enough is legally synonymous with complete failure. Men like Craig think big. They think in broad strokes. They think the details will sort themselves out. They think that because they are the directors of innovation, the universe will bend to their will. But the universe doesn't care about your job title. The universe cares about paperwork. I pulled up the digital record for patent 4312 on my dual monitors. The system lagged, the spinning wheel of death mocking me for a moment before the file popped up. Title: Adaptive Neural Network Optimization for High-Load Logistics. Inventor: Marla Jensen. Assignee: pending. There it was. The word that was going to cost them everything: pending. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. It was 4 years ago. I was going through my divorce. My ex-husband, a man who thought fidelity was a suggestion rather than a vow, had left me with a mountain of debt and a house I couldn't afford. I threw myself into work to keep from drowning. I spent nights, weekends, holidays in this office. The company was struggling then. They needed a fix for the latency issues in their AI model. The engineering team was stumped. The visionaries were panicked. So I did what I do. I fixed it. I wasn't an engineer by trade, but I knew the logic. I knew the compliance structures. I wrote the algorithm myself at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, fueled by stale vending machine coffee and the kind of insomnia that comes from staring at an empty side of the bed. I filed the provisional patent application myself. I listed myself as the inventor because, technically, I was. The standard procedure was for legal to send me an assignment of rights form within 3 months. I would sign it, transferring ownership to the company in exchange for, well, usually nothing. Maybe a generic thank you card and a $50 gift card to Applebee's. But 4 years ago, the legal department was in chaos. The old general counsel had been fired for embezzlement. Files were lost. Emails were deleted. The assignment of rights form for patent 4312 never came. I remembered waiting for it. I remembered checking my inbox every day for 2 weeks. And then I remembered the day I stopped checking. I remembered thinking it's their job to secure their assets. I'm just the compliance lady. If they had treated me well, if they had given me the respect, the pay, the acknowledgement I deserved, I would have walked into Robert's office years ago and said, "Hey, we missed a signature here." I would have fixed it because that's what I did. I fixed things. But today, Craig had stood in front of the entire leadership team and told me I wasn't a team player. He had taken food off my table. He had mocked my dedication. I looked at the screen. The patent had been granted 2 years ago, but without that assignment form, the rights remained with the inventor. Me. I owned the algorithm. I owned the code that ran the Gemini X module. I owned the engine of the rocket ship Craig was so proud of piloting. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf realizing the sheep have forgotten to lock the gate. I reached for my phone. I didn't call a lawyer, not yet. First, I needed to lock the door from the outside. I opened a new email draft. Subject, clarification of IP status. But I didn't send it to Craig. I didn't send it to Robert. I typed in the email address of a woman named Sarah. Sarah was the chief compliance officer at Titan Corp, our $400 million partner. We had met at a few dull conferences over the years. We had bonded over our shared hatred of buzzwords and our love for perfectly organized spreadsheets. I typed slowly, my fingers dancing over the keys. Hi, Sarah. Just doing some routine housekeeping on our end before the big merger. You confirm what documentation you have on file regarding the chain of title for the 4312 patent family? Our new director seems to think everything is automated, but you know how I worry about the details. Best, Marla. It was innocent. It was helpful. It was the kind of email a diligent, boring compliance specialist sends, but to a woman like Sarah, it was a fire alarm. It was a subtle, coded message that said, check your records. Something is wrong. Hit send? Then I minimized the window, opened my spreadsheet of daily tasks, and went back to work. I had audits to file. I had compliance checks to run. I was going to be the perfect employee. I was going to be exactly what Craig wanted, quiet, invisible, and efficient. While I worked, I imagined the email traveling through the fiber optic cables, bouncing off satellites, landing in a server in Chicago. I imagined the invisible thread tightening around Craig's neck. He wanted a paradigm shift? I was about to give him one. At noon, while the rest of the office filtered out to grab overpriced salads or hit the gym to burn off their corporate angst, I stayed at my desk. I unwrapped a turkey sandwich I'd brought from home, dry bread, efficient protein, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, this is Arthur, a gravelly voice answered. Arthur was 70 years old, retired patent examiner who now worked as a consultant for people who could afford his hourly rate. Or, in my case, for people who brought him homemade scotcheroos every Christmas for a decade. He was the oracle of IP law. He knew the code better than the people who wrote it. Arthur, it's Marla. Marla, to what do I owe the pleasure? Finally quitting that circus to come work for the firm? Not yet, Arthur. I have a hypothetical for you. I love hypotheticals. It usually means someone screwed up. Let's say an employee creates a patentable asset during non-work hours, on their own dime, and files it personally. Let's say the company lists the asset in a commercial contract, but never executes a formal assignment of rights. And let's say the employee contract at the time had a sunset clause on IP claims that expired 2 years ago due to a merger restructuring. There was a silence on the line. I could hear Arthur taking a drag of a cigarette. He was one of the few people left who smoked indoors. Probable fines be damned. The 2018 merger? Arthur asked. The one where they dissolved the LLC and reformed as a C Corp. That's the one. Marla, he wheezed, a sound that was half laugh, half cough. If they didn't get that assignment signed before the entity dissolution, that IP doesn't belong to the new C Corp. It belongs to the phantom of the old LLC. And since the LLC is dead, it defaults to the creator. Is it watertight? I asked, staring at a stain on my cubicle wall. Watertight? It's a bank vault, kid. Without that signature, they are selling a car they don't have the title to. If they try to execute a deal based on that IP, it's fraud, straight up. Why do you ask? Just checking the tire pressure, I said, using Craig's words. Thanks, Arthur. Give him hell, Marla. I hung up, confirmation. The weapon was loaded. 10 minutes later, my desk phone blinked. It was Sarah from Titan Corp. I put on my headset and adjusted my voice. I needed to sound helpful, slightly confused, and utterly non-threatening. Marla, hey, I got your email, Sarah said. She sounded tense. Good. I'm looking at the diligence room data room right now. You're asking about patent 4312? Right, I said, typing loudly on my keyboard to simulate casual busyness. Craig is our new innovation guy, very high energy. He mentioned that the Gemini X rollout is totally dependent on it. I just wanted to make sure the cross-reference numbers matched your records. Our legal drive is a bit of a mess since the migration. Marla, I'm looking at the file, Sarah said slowly. I see the patent grant. I see the technical specs. But the chain of title folder is empty. Oh, I said, that's odd. Maybe it was misfiled. I'm checking the USPTO public database right now, Sarah said. Her typing was frantic like machine gun fire. It lists the owner as you, Marla Jensen. Individually, does it? I feigned surprise. Well, that was the original filing. But surely there's an assignment document. I mean, we're about to sign a $400 million deal. Legal wouldn't have missed that. Marla, Sarah's voice dropped. If there's no assignment, Titan Corp can't touch this. Our risk compliance protocols strictly forbid integrating third-party IP without a full indemnification and ownership transfer. If this tech belongs to an individual, my God, does your director know? Craig, oh, he's very confident, I said. He told me explicitly today not to worry about the details. He said the IP is locked down. He's lying, Sarah said flatly, or he's an idiot. He's very. Visionary, I offered. I need to flag this, Sarah said. I have to put a hold on the payment schedule until this is cleared up. Marla, if this isn't resolved, the board is going to flay us alive for due diligence failure. I understand, Sarah. You have to do your job, just like I have to do mine. I'm sending a formal request for information to your general counsel, and I'm copying your CEO. Sounds like the right move. Good luck, Sarah. I hung up the phone. I took a sip of my lukewarm water. The fuse was lit. It would take a few hours for the request for information to work its way through the bureaucratic digestive system of our company. Legal would get it, panic, and start searching. They wouldn't find anything. Then they would call Craig. I checked the time, 1:15 p.m. I opened my email and drafted a request for personal day for tomorrow. Reason, mental health/stress management. I wouldn't be here when the bomb went off. I wanted them to sit in the rubble alone. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly what I was paid to do. I organized files. I updated compliance logs. I was a ghost haunting a machine I had already sabotaged. Around 3 o'clock p.m., I saw Craig strutting past my aisle. He was laughing into his headset, probably talking to a recruiter about how awesome he was. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was furniture. I was a copier that occasionally jammed. He had no idea that the furniture had just canceled his golden parachute. I packed my bag at 5 o'clock p.m. sharp. I took my personal notebook. I took my favorite pen. I left the company laptop on the desk. Good night, Marla, the security guard, Dave said as I swiped my badge at the exit. Good night, Dave, I said, smiling. I think it's going to be a quiet night. Hope so, he said. It wouldn't be. By tomorrow morning, this building would be a war zone, and I would be sitting at home in my pajamas watching the fire from a safe distance. I woke up at 7 o'clock a.m. naturally without an alarm. The sun was actually shining for once, filtering through the blinds of my condo. It was quiet. No buzzing fluorescent lights. No chatter about quarterly deliverables. I made coffee, good coffee, French press, not the sludge from the break room urn. I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the city wake up. My phone was on the kitchen counter, face down. I had put it on Do Not Disturb for everyone except my immediate family. But I could feel it vibrating. Not a constant buzz, but the rhythmic, desperate pulse of a device receiving too many notifications at once. BZZT, 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 BZZZZZZT. I took a sip of coffee. Dark roast, hints of cherry and chocolate. Delicious. Back at the office right about now. 8:30 a.m. stand-up huddle would be starting. Craig loved stand-ups. He made everyone stand in a circle and catch a foam football while stating their power goal for the day. It was infantizing and humiliating. I imagined the scene. Craig throwing the ball. My power goal is to finalize the Titan Corp signature. Thwack. He catches the ball. He grins. He looks around for applause. And then, the interruption. I walked into the kitchen and flipped my phone over. The screen was a wall of notifications. 5 missed calls from Robert, CEO. 3 missed calls from HR. 12 emails marked urgent/high priority. Text from Janice in accounting. Girl, what is happening? Legal is running around like their hair is on fire. Text from Dave, security. Mr. Craig is yelling at the printer. Just thought you should know, I smiled. The request for information from Sarah must have hit the general counsel's inbox late last night or early this morning. I opened the first email from Robert. Subject, urgent, IP documentation 4312 Marla. We have a query from Titan Corp regarding the assignment of the Gemini module patent. They claim the file is incomplete. I need you to pull the physical file and bring it to my office immediately. This is top priority. Robert. Sent at 8:15 a.m. I scrolled up. Subject, where are you? Marla, you're not at your desk. I don't care about your personal day. We have a crisis. Get in here, now. Sent at 8:45 a.m. and then a text from Craig. Just one. Call me, no please, no explanation, just a command. I put the phone back down. I wasn't going to call, not yet. I imagined the frantic search. The paralegals tearing through the filing cabinets. IT guys searching the server logs. They would find the patent filing. They would find my name, and then they would look for the transfer document. They would look in the digital archive, file not found. They would look in the physical Iron Mountain boxes, file not found. They would check the old merger documents, clause invalid. By 10 o'clock a.m., the realization would be setting in. It wouldn't be panic yet, it would be confusion. Surely it's just misplaced, they would say. Surely we didn't build a $400 million strategy on code we don't own. I decided to do some gardening. I have a small collection of succulents. They require very little attention, but when they thrive, they are beautiful. Kind of like the patent law they were currently ignoring. I watered them carefully. At 11:30 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the office line. It was a courier service. Hello? Miss Jensen, speaking. I have a priority package for you from Titan Corp Legal. Requires a signature. Are you at your listed home address? I am. Be there in 10. Sarah was fast. She wasn't just flagging the risk, she was locking the gate. When the courier arrived, he handed me a thick envelope. I signed for it. I opened it on my kitchen island. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a notice of contractual suspension. Dear Miss Jensen, pursuant to our due diligence audit regarding the pending partnership between Titan Corp and your company, We have identified you as the sole legal owner of patent hash 4312. As we have no record of a licensing agreement between yourself and your company, we are hereby notifying you that all integration of the Gemini X module involving your intellectual property has been halted effective immediately. You're prepared to open a direct dialogue regarding licensing should you wish to negotiate independently of your company. Sincerely, Titan Corp Legal Department. I laughed, a genuine belly laugh. They had bypassed the company entirely. Titan Corp knew a sinking ship when they saw one. They were reaching out to the captain of the lifeboat. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Robert. I decided to listen to this one. Marla. His voice was tight, high-pitched. Marla. Pick up the phone. Titan Corp just froze the accounts. They sent a formal cease and desist to us claiming you own the tech. What the hell is going on? Craig is saying you sabotaged the database. I need you here to explain this. Now, sabotage, of course, Craig would call it that. He couldn't conceive of a world where his failure was his own fault. I poured myself another cup of coffee. I sat down at my personal laptop, my customized, secure, non-company machine. I drafted a reply to Sarah at Titan Corp. Received. I am open to a conversation. But first, I need to resolve some internal matters with my current employer. Please keep the freeze in place until further notice. Then I finally replied to Robert, a text message. Short, precise. I am on a scheduled personal day. I will be in tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you would like to discuss the acquisition of my personal intellectual property, please have a meeting room prepared. And I suggest you have legal counsel present. You're going to need them. I hit send. The turn of the key was complete. The door was locked, and I was the only one with the way out. When I walked into the lobby the next morning, the silence was heavy enough to bruise. Usually there's a hum, phones ringing, people chatting about sports, the clatter of the espresso machine. Today, it was like walking into a wake. The receptionist, sweet girl named Kelly who usually wore bright scarves, looked pale. She saw me walk in and immediately picked up her phone, whispering something urgent. I swiped my badge, beep, still active, good. They weren't stupid enough to lock me out, not yet. I took the elevator to the fourth floor, the executive suite. As the doors opened, I saw them. A cluster of people in suits standing in the hallway, looking at tablets and shouting in hushed, aggressive whispers. Craig was there. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened, his top button undone. He had dark circles under his eyes that no amount of LinkedIn filtering could hide. He was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly to the general counsel, a man named Henderson who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. It's a glitch. Craig was saying, his voice cracking. It's a clerical error. She's a compliance specialist, not an engineer. She didn't invent anything, just filed the paperwork. The paperwork says she's the inventor, Craig. Henderson snapped back, and the paperwork says we don't own it. Titan Corp isn't freezing payments because of a glitch. They're freezing them because we're trying to sell them stolen goods. It's not stolen, it's company property. She worked here when she made it. Did you sign the assignment form? Henderson yelled. Did you check the file? That's her job, Craig screamed. She's the compliance officer. It's entrapment. She set me up, I stepped out of the elevator. The sound of my heels on the marble floor cut through their argument. Click, 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 they all turned. Craig's eyes went wide. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge at me, but then he saw the look on my face. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't scowling. I was completely, utterly blank. It was the face of the auditor, the face of the tax collector, the face of the inevitable. Marla, Robert said, stepping out of his office. He looked 10 years older than he had on Tuesday. In my office, now. Good morning, Robert, I said pleasantly. Is there coffee? I haven't had my second cup yet. This isn't a social call, Craig spat, stepping toward me. You think this is funny? You think you can hold the company hostage because of some filing error? I stopped and looked at him. I didn't raise my voice. I lowered it. It's not a filing error, Craig. It's the law, remember. Details you told me to park in the lot? Well, the lot is full and you're being towed. Craig's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I walked past him and into the boardroom, the same room where, 2 days ago, he had stripped me of my bonus. Robert followed me in. Henderson followed. Craig scrambled in last, looking like a cornered rat. We sat down. The dynamic had shifted physically. I sat at the head of the table. I didn't ask permission. I just took the seat. Robert hesitated, then sat to my right. Craig sat opposite me, vibrating with rage and fear. Titan Corp has frozen the $40 million initial tranche, Robert said, his voice shaking. They are threatening to pull the contract entirely and sue for breach of good faith. Our stock is down 12% in pre-market trading. Marla, tell us how to fix this. Fix it? I asked. I tried to fix it on Tuesday. I told you the assignment chain wasn't clean. You told me I had a bad attitude. We're past that, Henderson interrupted. Marla, let's be reasonable. We know you filed the patent, but you did it while employed by the company. Implied ownership statutes. Don't quote statutes at me, Henderson. I cut him off. I know the law better than you do. That's why you pay me, or used to pay me, to handle compliance. The work was done outside of business hours. The filing was done personally. The company had 90 days to execute the assignment of rights. You didn't. The company then dissolved and reformed. The rights didn't transfer because they weren't listed in the assets of the LLC. They defaulted to the inventor. I pulled a folder from my bag. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a notarized affidavit from the USPTO confirming my sole ownership. Patent 4312 is mine, I said. And since Gemini X cannot function without 4312, Gemini X is effectively mine too. This is extortion, Craig hissed. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just sitting here. You're the ones who sold a product you didn't own. That's fraud, Craig, federal fraud. Do you know what the penalty is for defrauding a partner in a merger involving publicly traded funds? It involves prison time. Not the nice kind of prison with tennis courts. Craig went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. What do you want? Robert asked. He sounded defeated. He knew I had them. I want to negotiate, I said, but not for a raise and certainly not for a bonus. I leaned forward. I want to discuss the terms of your surrender. The room was silent. Outside the glass walls, the office was paralyzed. But inside, the temperature had dropped to absolute zero. We can fire you, Craig blurted out. Gross misconduct. Insubordination. Go ahead, I said. Fire me. Then I walk out that door, call Sarah at Titan Corp and sell them the exclusive license to 4312 directly. They'll cut you out of the deal entirely. You'll lose the 400 million. You'll be sued by your shareholders. And you, I pointed a manicured finger at Craig, be unhireable in this industry for the rest of your life. Craig slumped back in his chair, so I said, opening my notebook, let's talk numbers. Robert was the first to speak. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of a man whose headache was rapidly evolving into a migraine. Okay, Marla, you've made your point. You have the leverage. We need the rights to 4312 assigned to the company to unlock the Titan Corp deal. What is the price? It's not a flat fee. I said calmly, we're discussing a licensing agreement. Licensing? Henderson, the general counsel, squeaked. Marla, we need a full buyout. Titan Corp wants clear title. Titan Corp wants the tech to work legally, I corrected. They don't care if you own it or license it, as long as the chain is valid. I am willing to grant an exclusive, perpetual license to the company for the use of patent 4312 in the Gemini X module, but I retain the underlying IP. That's highly irregular for an employee, Henderson muttered. So is publicly canceling a senior specialist's bonus because she pointed out a legal risk, I countered. But here we are. I looked at my notes. Here are the terms. First, a retroactive royalty fee for the use of my IP over the last 2 years. Based on the revenue generated by the beta modules, that comes to, let's call it $200,000. Craig choked on air. 200 grand? You're out of your mind. That's the friends and family discount, I said. If I take it to market, the valuation is higher. Second, a go-forward royalty of 2% on all gross revenue generated by the Gemini X line. 2% of gross, Robert stood up. Marla, that's millions of dollars over the life of the contract. We can't give an employee points on the package. Then don't, I said, closing my notebook. I'm happy to sell it to Titan Corp. They offered me a very generous consulting package this morning. I made to stand up. Sit down, Robert yelled. Then softer, please, sit down, I sat. Third, I continued as if nothing had happened. I want a formal written apology, signed by both of you, acknowledging that the delay in the deal was due to executive oversight and failure to heed compliance warnings. This will be filed with HR and sent to the board of directors. I'm not signing that, Craig said, his face turning red again. That's an admission of incompetence. Yes, I said, it is. I won't do it. It'll kill my career. Your career is already on life support, Craig. I'm just deciding whether or not to pull the plug. I turned to Robert. If he doesn't sign, no deal. The IP stays with me. The Titan deal dies. You explain to the shareholders why you lost $400 million to save the ego of a man who has been here for 90 days. Robert looked at Craig. The look wasn't friendly. It was the look of a man doing the math and realizing one variable was expendable. He'll sign, Robert said. Robert, Craig gasped. Shut up, Craig, Robert said. You caused this. You fix it. You sign the paper. And finally, I said, getting to the part I enjoyed the most. I want my title changed. I am no longer a senior specialist. I want to be named external consultant regarding IP strategy. I will work remotely. I will set my own hours. And I will report directly to the board, not to the director of innovation. You want to be a consultant? Henderson asked. While still employed, no, I said. I'm resigning. Today. The license agreement will be between the company and my new LLC, Jensen IP Solutions. It will be my first client. The retainer will be equal to my current salary, plus the royalties. The room was silent again. They were processing it. I was quitting, but they couldn't get rid of me. I was firing them as bosses and rehiring them as customers. If we agree to this, Henderson said slowly, you sign the license immediately. We can send it to Titan Corp by noon. The moment the wire transfer for the back pay hits my account and the apology is signed, I said, yes. Albert slumped in his chair. He looked at the whiteboard where Craig's growth strategy was still drawn in red marker. It looked childish now. Do it, Robert whispered. Draw up the papers, Henderson, but Robert, Craig started. I said do it. Robert slammed his hand on the table. And Craig, get out of my sight. Craig stood up. He looked at me. There was hatred in his eyes, but underneath it there was fear. He knew he had lost. He picked up his notepad and walked out of the room. He didn't strut this time, he shuffled. I stayed seated. I'll wait here while you draft the agreement, I said to Henderson, and make sure you use the standard template. I'd hate to have to correct your work again. Henderson nodded, looking like he wanted to vomit. I poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. It was cool and refreshing. They begged, they folded, and I hadn't even raised my voice. It took legal 3 hours to draft the contracts. I spent that time in the break room, eating a bagel and watching the news on my phone. People walked by, glancing at me with wide eyes. The rumor mill was churning. Marla sued the company. Marla is the new CEO. Marla is actually a spy for Titan Corp. The truth was more boring and more lucrative. When Henderson brought the papers back, they were thick. 30 pages of legalese designed to cover their asses while admitting defeat. I read every single word. I sat in the conference room, pen in hand, correcting typos. This indemnification clause is too broad, I said, scratching out a paragraph. Limit it to the scope of the 4312 patent family. Henderson sighed and made a note. But the most important part, the part they glossed over because they were so focused on the money, was Clause 14, Section B, right of technical integrity. It sounded harmless, just standard boilerplate about maintaining the quality of the licensed product. But I had worded it very carefully. The licensor, me, retains the right to audit the implementation of the licensed technology, Patent 4312, to ensure it operates within the specified parameters. Any modification, alteration, or optimization of the underlying algorithm by the licensee, the company, requires written approval from the licensor to prevent degradation of the asset. In plain English, it meant they couldn't touch my code. Craig's entire plan for scaling the Gemini X module involved tweaking the algorithm to run faster on cheaper hardware. It was a stupid idea that would destabilize the whole system, but it would save them money in the short term. It was classic innovation director thinking: break the product to fix the margin. With Clause 14b, he couldn't do it. If he tried to tweak the code, I could pull the license for breach of technical integrity. I was effectively locking the hood of the car. They could drive it, but they couldn't mess with the engine. Is this clause standard? Robert asked, squinting at the page. It's standard for high-value AI licensing, I lied smoothly. Titan Corp will expect it. They don't want you breaking the engine and blaming the vendor. Fine, Robert said. Just sign it. I signed. Marla Jensen, President, Jensen IP Solutions. Good on paper. Then I slid the apology letter across the table. Sign, I said. Robert signed it quickly like he was signing a speeding ticket. Craig is in his office, Robert said. You want me to bring him in? No, I said. I'll go to him. I took the paper and walked down the hall to Craig's office. The door was closed. I didn't knock. I opened it. Craig was on the phone, his back to the door. No, bro, it's just a minor hiccup. We're still crushing it. Yeah. I'm handling it. He spun around when he heard the door. He hung up the phone. Sign this, I said, dropping the paper on his desk. He looked at it. I, Craig Miller, acknowledge that the failure to secure IP rights. I can't believe you're doing this, he said, his voice shaking. You're ruining the team dynamic. There's no team, Craig. There's just the people who do the work and the people who take credit for it. Today, the bill came due. He picked up a pen. His hand was trembling. He signed it. It was a messy scrawl. Thank you, I said, taking the paper back. Are you happy? He asked. You got your money. You got your win. Are you happy? I looked at him. I thought about the years of missed holidays. I thought about the growth mindset lectures. I thought about the yoga retreat his wife was probably booking right now with his non-existent bonus. I'm not happy, Craig, I said. I'm compliant. And right now, that feels like the same thing. I walked out. I stopped by payroll on the way out. My wire transfer? Processed, Janice whispered, giving me a thumbs up. Hit your account 2 minutes ago, thanks, Janice. I walked back to my desk. I picked up my bag. I picked up my succulent. I left the company laptop. I left the ID badge on the keyboard. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw the office one last time. The gray carpet, the buzzing lights. Cage where I had spent 12 years. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was the warden. The air outside the building tasted different. It was still Minneapolis air, cold, crisp, smelling faintly of exhaust, but it felt lighter. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan that was fully paid off, and sat in the driver's seat for a long time. I checked my bank account on my phone. The number was long, comically long. The back pay, plus the first royalty advance, was more money than I had made in the last 5 years combined. I drove home. I didn't blast music. I didn't scream. I listened to a podcast about architectural history. It was soothing. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet victory. I set up Jensen IP Solutions in my spare bedroom. It took me about an hour. I bought a new chair, a really expensive one. I bought a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. The gossip from the office reached me through Janice and Dave. Craig is on a rampage. Janice texted me 3 days later. He tried to push a code update to the Gemini module. IT told him they needed your written permission. He literally threw a stapler. I smiled. Clause 14b in action. Robert is making him undergo leadership retraining, another text said, which basically means he has to sit in HR seminars all day. He looks like a deflated balloon. And then the Titan Corp news broke. Titan Corp announced the official launch of the Gemini X partnership. In the press release, there was a quote from Sarah, the compliance chief. We are thrilled to partner with company name and to leverage the robust, independently verified architecture provided by Jensen IP Solutions. Security and integrity are our top priorities. She had name-dropped me. She had publicly validated that I was the guarantee of quality, not the company. My phone started ringing, not from Robert, from other firms, headhunters, legal departments at other tech giants. They saw the press release. They looked up the patent. They realized that there was a freelance compliance wizard who had brought a $400 million deal to its knees and walked away with the keys. We need someone to audit our IP portfolio. One VP from a biotech firm told me, we don't want a Marla incident on our hands. I'm quite expensive, I told him. We expect you to be, he replied. I took the job. I was working less, earning triple, and I never had to sit in a synergy huddle again. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the email I received from Craig about a month after I left. Subject, request for variance Marla. You need to adjust the latency parameters on the 4312 algorithm to accommodate the new server load. Please sign the attached waiver to allow us to modify the code. Craig, he had to ask. He had to beg permission to do his job. I waited 24 hours to reply. Dear Craig, I have reviewed your request. Based on my analysis, modifying the latency parameters introduces a 0.4% risk of data corruption. This falls outside the acceptable quality threshold defined in Clause 14b. Request denied. Best, Marla Jensen, President. I imagined him reading it. I imagined the vein popping in his forehead. I took a sip of my expensive coffee. Compliance isn't the enemy, Craig. Arrogance is. And I was the auditor sent to collect the debt. Midwest Tech Summit is the kind of event where everyone wears lanyards that cost more than a Honda Civic and drinks champagne that tastes like apples. It was held in Chicago this year. I wasn't there as an employee, I was there as a speaker. My panel was titled, The Invisible Asset, Why IP Compliance is Your Most Dangerous Liability. The room had been packed. After the panel, I walked through the mixer in the main ballroom. I was wearing a new suit, navy blue, tailored, sharp as a knife. I held a glass of sparkling water. I saw them near the buffet, Robert and Craig. They looked diminished. Robert looked tired, his shoulders slumped. Craig looked desperate. He was scanning the room, eyes darting around, looking for someone important to talk to. He spotted Sarah from Titan Corp. She was standing with a group of investors, laughing. Craig straightened his tie. He tapped Robert on the shoulder. They started moving toward her. They were going to try to network. They were going to try to pretend everything was great. I moved to intercept. I didn't rush, I just glided. Sarah, I called out, my voice warm and projecting perfectly over the crowd. Sarah turned, her face lit up. Marla, oh my God, that panel was amazing. The way you described the zombie LLC loophole, genius. She stepped away from the investors and hugged me, actually hugged me. Craig and Robert froze mid-step. We're 10 feet away, close enough to be seen, too far to be included. Marla, Robert said, nodding stiffly. Good to see you. Craig didn't say anything, he just stared at my badge, Marla Jensen, President, Jensen IP. Hello, Robert, I said. Craig, how is the latency project going? Still struggling with those parameters? Craig flushed a deep, ugly purple. We're managing, he muttered. We've actually updated our vendor policy, Sarah said, looking coldly at Robert. Going forward, any IP integration for the Gemini project goes through Marla's firm first for validation. We don't trust your internal audit team anymore. No offense. None taken, I said cheerfully. That's going to add weeks to the timeline, Craig protested. Then you better start filing your requests earlier, I said. And Craig, make sure you use the correct form this time. I rejected the last one because you used the deprecated template. The investors around Sarah were watching. They were sensing the power dynamic. They saw the tired CEO, the sweaty director, and the woman standing between them and the money. We should go, Robert said, grabbing Craig's elbow. We have a dinner reservation. Enjoy, I said. Don't forget to get a receipt. Compliance is strict these days. They walked away. They didn't look back. They looked like two men who had been mugged without ever seeing a weapon. Sarah turned back to me. You are absolutely ruthless, she said, grinning. I'm just thorough, I replied. I took a sip of my water. The room buzzed around me. I checked my phone, a notification from my bank. The quarterly royalty payment had just cleared. I looked at the number. It was enough to retire. It was enough to buy a house in Italy. It was enough to do whatever I wanted, but I wasn't going to retire. I was having too much fun. I walked out of the ballroom into the cool Chicago night. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. The airport, I said. I have a consultation in New York tomorrow. Someone forgot to sign a waiver. I leaned back in the seat and watched the city lights blur past. Craig was right about one thing. It was a paradigm shift. He just didn't realize he was the one being shifted out.